This book, Waves of Hope, is history. It's totally honest. It's all factual and it's truthful, and I'm proud of that. The way this happened was I was cleaning out. I said to my mother just prior to her 100th birthday, I said, "Mom, we got to get through some of this stuff." My mother's a collector, but she's very, very organized, extremely organized. Barbara was at her house and she can vouch for that, I think. But yeah. Mom has a lot of things, but everything's in its place. So I started with a closet. I said, "You know, Mom, you're 100 years old. I'll tell you how I deal with my mother's age. I have a sense of humor about it, okay?" She'll say to me, "Ron, I need paper towels." I'll bring the paper towels back. And she said, "Why didn't you get the extra large?" I go, "Mom, you're 100 years old at the time. You're 100 years old, Mom. I didn't think you wanted the extra large, you know, extra sheets, all that stuff." That's how I deal with that, because I love my mother, and she's been a great mom and wife to my father and mother to myself and my sister. Anyway, I started cleaning some things out. I said, "Mom, you know, I'm not going to throw anything away. You know, I just need for you to spend a little time with me here." So I saw a big box at the bottom of a closet, and it said 1946, and it was taped. I said, "Mom, are these Daddy's love letters, you know, from the war kind of thing?" She said, "No, open it up. Wait until you see this." Now, she never, ever uttered a word about what she did during World War II. So I opened up the box, and all these letters were in there, and there were over 200 letters, 213 letters, I think, or 210 letters. And I said, "Mom, what's this all about?" And I saw addresses, return addresses from all over the United States. And she said, "Oh, the letters I got back from the prisoner of war families that I wrote to during the war." And I said, "Mom, just start from scratch at the very beginning here, because we never heard anything about this." She never discussed it with anyone. She's one of 11 children. And when I tell you the Verdi family is close, the Verdi family is close. Her brothers and sisters, there's 4 left now, but she was very, very close to everyone, never discussed it with anyone. So she started telling me the story, how the beginning of the war was very dismal for the United States, both in the Atlantic as well as in the Pacific. And we all know the story about Pearl Harbor. And she said all the news coming back was very bad. Mom lived in a town called Nutley, New Jersey, and Nutley had a great weekly newspaper. And every week, there were pictures of American flyers that were listed as missing in action or dead when their B-17 bombers or B-24s were shot down over Europe. So the word coming back was very dismal and sad. And she started reading about these folks. And at the same time, there was a tremendous amount of pressure put on by the American families after they didn't hear from their soldiers, their flyers, their crews of B-17s and 24s. There was no word coming back as to their fate. And American families, wives, mothers, fathers, brothers, sisters, all of that, started putting pressure on the US government and said, "You have to find out the status. Is my loved one dead? Is my loved one a prisoner, alive, whatever?" And the Red Cross, thank goodness for the Red Cross, because they took an active role in pressuring the German government, the Nazi government, to release names. So in old World War I veteran that lived in the neighborhood said to my mother, "Hey, they're just starting to announce names on Radio Berlin, but you need a shortwave radio to hear this." So the German government agreed to announce five names a night. And they would announce Joseph Smith, Toledo, Ohio. My mother would tune in to a shortwave radio that she secured or acquired, and she would write the name of Joe Smith, the family of Joe Smith, Toledo, Ohio, and write to them and said, "I heard your loved one's name mentioned. He's alive." Well, she wrote over 300 letters. 213 families responded back and wrote her beautiful letters thanking her with gratitude for what she did. At least now they knew that their loved one was alive, and there was hope there that the family may see them again. So she used a shortwave radio, and she offered hope to the families, and that's where the title came from. Well, we're living in history right here, and when I saw those letters and saw the responses back from the families, to me that was a slice of American history, World War II history, if you will. And I figured I got to document this. So getting back to meeting with my mother and reading these letters, as I read through them, I got very emotional. Some of them were really, and in the book, they were really scary to think that these people are going through every day with unknown. They don't know if their loved one is alive. And I decided to document what she told me. So I would go to her house about twice a week with a pad, and I would ask her questions. I wanted to know from her what was going on when Pearl Harbor hit. What was going on in Nutley, New Jersey? What was going on in our family, her family, my father's family? And how did that progress through the war? What happened all during that period of time? And I wanted to know what her reason was to write to these families. And she told me that there were two reasons. She felt so badly for the families that she said when her father, it was 1925, her father was a commercial fisherman, born and raised in Boston, by the way, my mom, and he went out to sea and his boat capsized and he was listed as dying, that the boat sunk and his whole crew perished. She remembers the tragedy that occurred in the family with the unknown. There was no body. They didn't know whether or not her father survived or not. That was the first thing where she saw her family struggle through very large emotions, the whole family. The second thing was mom moved to Nutley, New Jersey. Her father was rescued after 2 weeks on a little island, the only one rescued. And he decided, I can't do deep sea fishing anymore. I'm going to open up a fish market. All I know is fish. He had a sister in Kearney, New Jersey. She said, move down here and do that. He drove down the street, Franklin Avenue in Nutley, saw an open store for available, and he decided he was going to open up a fish market. So this is 1936. So mom now is in Nutley in 1936. And her brother, mom is one of 11 children, and they're all 2 years apart. I don't know how that was planned, but it was planned, trust me. Her brother, that was 4 years younger than she, went to the town pool with his friends. And as I did when I was growing up, a lot of the boys picked him up, threw him into the pool. They threw him too far, and he hit his head on the cement, and he perished.
Oh my God.
So that was the second tragedy that she had in her family. And she said to herself, when these flyers were missing, dead or missing in action, she said, I can imagine what those families are going through, not knowing what the outcome is of their family and how this all impacted their family. And that's why she did what she did. That was her motivation to write to the families. So after I documented everything, I wanted to put something together for her 100th birthday. Val, my wife Val, and I said, what are we going to do for mom? She's got everything. So first thing we did was we bought her an iPad because we figured, mom, you got to get into technology now. You're 100 years old. And her nieces, nephews, grandchildren all wanted to write her emails and things like that. That's the first thing we did. Second thing we did, I decided to go to a printer and to document in a book, not a publisher, a printer, all that she told me. And it was all based on the memories of Agnes Joan Negra. And I said to my mother from day one, this all has to be factual, Mom. I do not want to write anything that's not absolute. So we gave this to my mom at her 100th birthday. And people were coming up to us saying this book should be published. This is a great story. Another lady decided that she was friends with a publisher and asked me for a copy of the manuscript. I gave it to her, and the book was published through that publisher. So it was really quite remarkable how all that turned around. Okay. Getting back to Nutley, I said, Mom, tell me what happened on Pearl Harbor. What happened in 1941, December 7th? She says, well, Dad and I, she was a newlywed, by the way, and she was married in September, and she had just found out that early that December that she was pregnant. So she said, Dad and I went to Holy Family Church, their church parish, as they did every Sunday, and then they would go to my grandparents, Negra's house, for early dinner, late lunch, early dinner. And she said, that's what we did. So her plan was to go there for dinner and announce to the family that she was expecting a baby. Well, at 2 o'clock that afternoon, boys, the men, my father and his brothers and his father were listening to WOR radio to the New York Giants, Brooklyn Dodgers football game. I said, Mom, the Dodgers were baseball team. They weren't. She said, Ron, they were listening to the Brooklyn Dodgers, New York Giants game. And an announcer cut in and said, Pearl Harbor has just been bombed, fear of thousands lost, Navy, et cetera. But they went right back to the game. And she said, they were all sitting there kind of with their mouths open in shock. Well, how could you go back to a football game after you just announced thousands could have been lost? So she said she was going to announce that she was pregnant, and she thought that Pearl Harbor would take precedent over the president, so she never made that announcement. She left that day. All the men ran down to enlist, and she begged my father, she was only a couple months pregnant, she begged my father not to do that. My father went down, enlisted in the Navy, and then was rejected. I'll tell you why in a second. But anyway, so Pearl Harbor took an impact on the town and on the people and on everyone around it. Nutley was a very small town, 18,000 people, but still small. Everyone knew everyone, and they knew all the boys that went in right away and who perished in the early days of the battle. And my mother was wrapped into that. When she started writing these letters, she was amazed that the post office, gosh, we got to give them credit. I know we pick on them all the time, but the post office delivered letters to all these families that she wrote to. There are towns, and you'll see them in the book, the letters that came back to her. There were towns that were little teeny tiny hamlets in the middle of Minnesota. And the post office got the letter that said Joe Smith, such and such Minnesota, and they delivered that letter. New York City had letters delivered to people that lived in Manhattan or in the boroughs. Remarkable to me that the post office had, without an address, just a name in a town or location. And as the letters started coming back to my mother, she realized her mom's biggest line, drives my sister and I nuts sometimes, it's no big deal. I say, Mom, you're not gonna believe what happened to me. Ron, it's no big deal. Mom, I was in that, it's no big deal. You know, wait until tomorrow we get better. Mom's big line always was, what I did was not a big deal. I wanted those families to know that someone cares about them, to notify them about their loved one. Well, the letters came back, and she just put them in a box and put them away. Never, ever, ever talk to anybody about them. Now, some interesting things happened, and I really enjoyed interviewing her to get some of the information. As she went through this period of time, her mailman, Mr. McMahon, right, was a character. He was a family friend, but an older guy. And what he used to do was, he knew the family very well, but he knew a lot of other families in town. When he saw that a letter was coming through from overseas, he would go in front of people's homes and he would do this. This is his whistle, by the way. And that told the people in the house they got a letter from their loved one in the service. Mom stopped hearing from, my father went into the Army, by the way, and he was wounded at the Battle of the Bulge, and Mom had not heard anything for 3 months. She wasn't even notified that he was missing in action, but his whole platoon was wiped out. And he was laying on the ground and he was moaning. And the underground, Belgian underground, 3 fellows came by and heard him moan and rescued him and brought him to Belgium, to one of the family homes, and hid him out in their attic. And that's how my father survived the war before they got him back into American lines. So fast forward now, months later, my mother was in the kitchen with my sister, my baby sister, and she heard, she went running downstairs, and Mom said it was like New Year's Eve. She was hugging the mailman, he was hugging her, Mr. McMahon, and he said, there's a letter here, and I'm sure it's about your husband. Mom opened it up, and it was in French. The underground, the Belgian underground had taken my father and smuggled him back to American lines. The northeast section of France had been liberated, and the Americans set up the 95th Army Hospital in that area. And the Belgian people knew that, so it was on the Belgian line. And they brought my dad there, and he was nursed there for 44 days, back surgery, concussion, all kinds of things. And he said to his nurse, you have to get a letter out to my family. You have to get a letter to my wife. Well, letters were restricted. They were all censored anyway, but they didn't want the Nazis who were still in the area to pick up information that the hospital was there and jeopardize all of the soldiers. Well, the nurse, in some way, got a letter out, went through France, through England, and got to my mother. And when she heard the whistle and opened up the letter was in French. And what it said was, and my French is a little rough, I'm not even going to try it today. What it said was, dear Mrs. Negra, your husband is alive. Well, she couldn't read that. And there wasn't anyone in that neighborhood in Nutley, just so you know, that could understand French or translate French. So my mother remembered Nutley High School, my father's junior and senior year. He had a French teacher, Miss Helen Gerdnick. She ran down to Nutley High School, found Miss Gerdnick, and Miss Gerdnick translated the letter, and that's how she found out her husband was alive. Quite interesting, huh? The unknown and the emotions of the unknown are just very striking, and they are, I think, throughout the book. When the story came out and was published, we started getting phone calls and through the internet. It's so powerful on the internet. I mean, people find you. We start getting emails and phone calls from people that read the book and had their own experiences. And slowly, organizations started calling us saying, come and speak with us, come and speak to our group. So we started to do that, and it was amazing how many people in the audience had fathers that were POWs, or family members, or had their own World War II slice of history story. And then a woman from Virginia sent Val an email. And this was really striking. She sent a picture of herself holding up Waves of Hope. And she said, I thoroughly enjoyed this book. And Val got that picture and said, what are we going to do for Mom's 101st birthday? Well, we decided we were going to collect pictures from all over the world, people that are contacting us and have been contacting us. We decided to put it in a memory album for Mom. And these are people that sent us pictures holding the book and making comments about how much they love the book and their own family history, things like that. And they just kept rolling in. And if someone called us up like Barbara and said, hey, I want to know about this book. I really want to read this book. We'd say to Barbara, gee, Barbara, after you read the book, would you mind sending us a selfie of yourself? And we'll put it in Mom's memory album. Well, there are now 5 books like this that have been from all over. We got something from a man in England who was with his granddaughter. And he sent us a picture of them reading the book. One of the most memorable things was a man from Long Island, a grandfather, had his grandson on the couch. And he sent us a picture of himself, and he was reading the grandson the letters. And he said, his caption was, you're never too young to learn about greatness. You're never too young to learn about greatness. We thought that was so touching that the grandfather would take his time and educate his grandson as to what people went through, that greatest generation group, if you will. So that was something that came out, which we thought was kind of neat to do. And Mom enjoys it. She's going to sit there right now and start looking at it. We've taken them with us because Val's doing different things with them. We're getting so many requests for information and stuff, and Val's been doing a few things that Mom doesn't know about yet, but she will shortly.
I told you I'm capping the photo albums at 5. There's like 100 pictures in each album, and I said, that's it. We're going to 5, and then we're stopping.
Several other things have come about too, which we're very proud of. The book is really 2 stories. It's about what my mother did, without any fanfare, by the way. And the second part is what the families went through that had loved ones that were shot down and captured and put into prisoner of war camps. My mother said, I said, Mom, do you have any regrets? And she said, well, I have one. And the regret is that she never contacted any of the families that she wrote to and wrote back to her to find out if their loved one returned. And I said, Mom, why didn't you do that? And she said, well, for privacy purposes, I didn't want to do that to the family. The wounds were still pretty open, whether they made it or not. And she said, if they didn't, if the soldier or airman didn't make it, I didn't want to kind of bring the family back through that whole experience. So we had no idea. So I decided a few months ago, I got to find out. We have the names and addresses, the diary that she kept of all the people she wrote to and the people that wrote back to her. And I decided to do a research, a search to find out if I could find the families. Now, we come from a metropolitan area, and we're just accustomed to hopping somewhere else, or our kids grow up and they move to another town somewhere. A lot of these Midwestern families, especially the Midwestern folks, they stay where they grow up, and so do their children and their children's children and all that. So the research that I've been doing so far is I'm finding a bunch of people. We think about 50% of the people that she wrote to, of the soldiers came back. But I'm finding many of the families of those names in that town, at that address, which gives me, it just gives me more stamina to say, hey, this is the person, this is the family. And I'm going to start writing to them and asking them if they can provide me history. A lot of the obituaries, by the way, that I found talk about the airmen, if you will, and their background. One man, my regret is that I didn't do this earlier. Many of them, if not all, are gone. They passed. One man played golf on his 99th birthday, and the next day he went to sleep and didn't wake up.
Oh my God.
And I thought that was really kind of remarkable. Is there anything else now that I'm leaving out?
Tell them the story about Info Age.
Oh, let's get back to the
Your
Giants
mother's-
and Brooklyn Dodgers
with your
story.
mother's memory.
My mother said, Ron, it was Brooklyn Dodgers, and they cut into that game, they were playing the Giants. So I said, okay, Mom. Now, she was never wrong. So we get a call from the curator of a museum called Info Age. We never knew it existed. It's in Wall Township, New Jersey. Quite an interesting place. And there are a lot of men there, older men, that are, their objective is to preserve radio, TV, shortwave radio. And the curator called us and said, I see a nod. Have you been there? Quite,
Just heard
people are wonderful. They really are there. And the man called up, he was 92, 94, something like that. And he was a young kid during the war. And he said, I was fascinated. I read your book. Can you please come and speak with us? I said, sure. When do you want me to come? And we made the appointment and we went in there and the whole crew was there. They were really great. They're there to preserve history. That's their goal. Okay. And this is part of the history that they want to preserve, the shortwave part. But we went there and one of the gentlemen came up to us and said, would you like to hear the actual broadcast? I mean, the first broadcast on WLR Pearl Harbor. I said, absolutely. You're not going to believe this. My mother told me the Giants and the Dodgers were playing football. I said, I'm sure she's mistaken. I'm sure it was the Giants and somebody else. He says, no, it was the New York Giants and the Brooklyn Dodgers. The Brooklyn Dodgers had a football team. I said, oh, this is remarkable. So he said, we have the 1941 room set up. I said, what is that? They said, well, so we walked in and it was a parlor that they had set up as it was in 1941 with the doilies on the couches and all that stuff. And they had the shortwave radio there. And he said, watch this. So he hit the button and the announcement came on and he said, we're breaking into the New York Giants Brooklyn Dodgers football game for an announcement. Pearl Harbor was bombed. And Val and I looked at each other. We said, she's right again. Who heard of the Brooklyn Dodgers reading a book? Maybe some of you did, but we didn't. So that was quite remarkable. Okay. If anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to hear them. Yes, sir. Yes,
Well,
Jeff.
first of all, it's a remarkable story and what you've accomplished is amazing. When you sent the letters, may I ask your mom a question?
Sure.
Yeah. When you sent the letters out,
I know you can't hear.
I'll come over.
I'll repeat it.
Okay. Did a fairly high percentage of the people you send the letters to, did their family respond in any way?
The percentage of the people that responded, of all the letters, you sent out 313 letters or 12 letters. And I know over 200 responded.
Wow.
So that's a very high percentage. My end of the business was marketing, I can tell you, marketing research and all that. That's a very, very high percentage. You don't get that kind of return.
Tell Jeff about how she addressed and signed the letters.
Oh, if you read the book and look at the book, I chose 75 letters that were returned to her. The others are all in books over here, if you want to check them out. But I chose the letters, and as I was reading through the letters, when I found them, I said to my mother, Mom, these are all addressed in Dad's name. Why did you do that? She said, we were being told by our government, by the United States government, don't believe anything you hear. That was number one, because all types of misinformation was being given out and propaganda. The German government had a heck of a propaganda machine. So don't listen to what you hear. I mean, don't absorb it much, but don't talk about it because a lot of it's false. It's not true. She felt two reasons. One, that message. And the second reason was that she was a woman, a young woman, 21 years old, that not many people would believe. So she put my father's name there, thinking a man's name would validate or give more credibility. You know, we're talking about, it happens today, I know, but we're talking about times back then where, what would the woman do? It was Rosie the Riveter, and mostly housewives or not married, women that were working, doing something. The man's name, she felt just had more credibility. So I went through all these letters. Now, toward the end, she started using her own name. But as I was going through these letters, I'm going, Mom, they're all addressed to Daddy. She said, well, I figured they would write back if it was a man. And with a woman, they'd say, oh, she's just some emotional housewife that wants to get her name in print somewhere. So that's the story behind that. You'll realize that when you look at the letters. Okay. Any other questions? Oh, I'm sorry.
Like, how long, let's say she sent a letter out today, would it be a month later that she's here or approximately?
Mom, when you sent the letter out to a family member, how long did it take for them to return it to you?
Right away.
Yeah.
Really, they were so happy to hear that their son was alive,
Yeah.
you know, and her husband was alive.
Mhm.
Right away. I had to go down from the stairs, the back stairs, to get the letter.
She was on the second floor,
I was
Barbara.
on the
She used to
second
run down to
floor,
the mailbox and see if
and
she
the
got anything.
postman used to whistle, so I can go downstairs. And the baby, my baby was 18 months old when he was
When my father was missing in that.
drafted. And I put her by the window on the second floor. And every time she saw the postman, hurry up, Mommy, he's coming. So I would go downstairs and the cards, the answers were there.
When my dad finally came home, 1946,
They wrote it right away.
1946, when he finally came home, the postman came over and he gave my mother and father this whistle. Because he remembered how much this meant to her to hear this whistle, knowing that there was a word there.
Just show them that this is the actual shortwave. My father-in-law took a picture of, that's Ryan,
Oh, the kid.
and Patty, that's his sister, in front of the shortwave radio. That's the only picture we really have of it. And my sister-in-law, the only thing she has to say about it is she hates her outfit. Don't put that on me. But anyway, I thought it was a great picture, so that's why we, put it in.
So a few months ago, the Daughters of the American,
Oh, Ronnie was born after the war, yeah.
we got a request from the Daughters of the American Revolution. They were having their meeting in Williamsburg, Virginia. And I said to Val, gee, what would they want? I mean, this is World War II. And the women that belong to that organization, there are many of them, go back to the revolution. And they're knee deep in history about the revolution. Well, they're history people, as you folks are. And they asked me to come down and speak to their meeting in Williamsburg, which we did. Mom couldn't make that. It was just too far a trip for her. So we had a fabulous experience there. And I guess about a month later, we got a phone call saying that the book was nominated and sent to the DAR National Museum in Washington, D.C., and it was accepted into their museum, the National Museum. Then a letter came and it said the DAR was awarding my mother their highest award, which is to name her in Woman in History. They gave her the award as well as a medal. And I brought it over to my mom. The lady came up from the DAR, which she wanted to present it, which was wonderful. Presented it to my mom, and I said, hey, Mom, I did some research to find out what women are in this Woman in History medal and award from the DAR. So we saw Dolly Madison and Martha Washington.
Oh my God.
You made it. What a nice thing the DAR did. That was really absolutely wonderful. So that's another little side story. I've heard of it here.
There's a question.
Yes,
You,
Barbara.
when we talked, whatever that was, months ago, you said that she won another award, Hometown Hero.
Yes.
Yes,
Did you say her?
she's asking about the hometown hero. You were designated a hometown hero in World War II.
Oh, yeah, World War II, yeah.
Bob Dole.
At the World War II National Memorial.
Yes, World War II National Memorial in DC. They heard about the book and started reading and acknowledged my mother as a hometown hero of World War II. That's the other
Yeah.
award, Barbara, that we talked about. Yes, Jeff.
So I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, you mentioned your dad came home in 46, is that correct?
The war ended. He was wounded in 44,
Yeah.
recovered in 45, went back on the front lines.
That's what I was gonna ask
to
you.
Normans Italian. And he tells the story, he said, Ron, I ended up, and my father never talked about the war.
Yeah.
And I said, Dad, why don't they just send you home after you're recovered? You know? He said, I was assigned to this, we called him a nut. He said, he was from Georgia. And he said, this guy was in a Jeep, my dad drove his Jeep, and he would have a sword. And he would stand up in the Jeep and he would do one of these charge.
Oh, my God.
He said they were taking, I forgot what farmhouse, I forgot, I have it written home. And he said, this guy would be at the front and, take his sword out and charge him. My father was driving the Jeep. And he said, how on earth did I ever end up here? I was better off at the Battle of the Bulge. So you're right. So the guy was a true patriot, who ended up getting killed, by the way.
Oh, wow.
And you want to know how he got killed?
Of course.
He told my father to pull the Jeep over, that he had to relieve himself. And as he walked over and he was doing that, 88 shell came and.
Oh, my God.
Oh, my God.
Uh-huh.
I said, Dad, God was with you. God was with you. So that's how he ended the war. That's how his end came into the war. So Dad came home in 46. And, what do you do? Where do you go? Where do you work? I mean, everyone was in the same boat, pretty
Yeah.
much so,
It's tough.
it really was.
Well, there's a question.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, sir.
You did the research to see how many people came back.
Correct.
Were there a lot that did?
I'm estimating, I don't know this actual.
Yeah, right,
I'm still
right.
doing it. About 50% of the people that she contacted did not come back.
Wow. That's a lot.
Because that is a lot, it really is. It got a little bit better for the, from everything I've read, the history I've read, it got a little bit better for the airmen because the German Luftwaffe, members of the Luftwaffe, had great respect for the US. And many times they had prisoners of war, US prisoners of war, transferred to prisoner of war camp stalags that had a lot of airmen in them.
Yeah.
So they bring them back together.
Solid look.
Stalag, that's right, Stalag Luft. So they were trying to be protective and help out the US airmen. So there was a piece of generosity there, or compassion.
And just wanted to, nobody from the Pacific she was involved with?
No, just the
Just
Atlantic.
the Europe.
Yeah, just Europe.
Ron,
Yes.
just please read the new quote that's on the back.
Yeah, we received so many comments back, and they're all in these books, these memory albums, Spouse captured all them. So many really nice things. But a mother of a prisoner of war wrote to my mother, June 21st, 1943. And this is after my mother notified her that her son was alive and a prisoner of war. She said, quote, as long as there are Americans like you who are doing such wonderful work and giving such wonderful service to our fellow Americans, I'm sure victory will be ours, and you can be sure you and others like you have played a vital part. That's end quote.
Wow.
So many, my mother received stamps. Okay, the one method back then was using a postcard to communicate, plain postcard. And of course, you had to put a stamp on it. And it was one cent or whatever it was. And also letters. I forgot. Were they 3 cents, Mom? The letters? I can't remember.
3
3 cents,
cents.
yeah.
They were even
Oh, yeah.
sending me stamps.
Yeah, stamps. People would send her, mothers, wives, they would send, sisters, they would send her a picture of their loved one, of their soldier that was taken before they went off to war. And, just heartfelt messages, you've given me hope that my loved one, my son, whatever, my brother will make it back. That's a lot of the comments are around that, and they're in the book. So you can read about the responses. Yes.
I loved your remarks, Ron. Thank you so much. Was the government, they must have been privy to this information also because it was over the airwaves. Were they not reaching out purposefully? Or was the bureaucracy just so slow that your mom could get to the families much quicker?
It's the latter. Yeah. Some people never heard. If you read the letters, they'll say, Mrs. Negra, or Mr. Negra, your word was the first word that we heard
Wow.
that my son is alive, that my son is a POW. And I found that hard to believe because my mother was listening to this Radio Berlin. It was just, I think the bureaucracy,
Yeah.
the amount of
Yeah.
people was just overbearing.
Wow.
Great question. Thank you. Anyone else? Yes, John.
I have to ask this as a legacy to your father. What did he do after the war when he came home?
Okay. My father wanted to go to college. He was the baby of four. And the oldest one went to West Point and then a four-year college. The other two guys were both in the war. One was a gunner on a B-17, and he was shot down of Yugoslavia, captured, and then rescued by the Yugoslavian underground. But the family had no idea what his existence was, if he was alive or not. He came back and he went to work for a medical products company in manufacturing. The next brother, one above my father, he was a commander in the tank battalion under Patton. And he came back uninjured, and he also worked for a medical products company. My dad was an athlete, and he played ball in high school, Nutley High School and all that. And all the guys that came back, got together and started playing ball again. And they all had little side jobs, to see, what am I gonna do? Where am I gonna get a job? And laborers, some went to college. And they played ball one night and they were in a bar called the Town Cocktail Lounge in Nutley. And the chief of police walked in. Nutley's population was really starting to grow. The chief of police walked in, who knew my grandfather, and walked up to my father and said, "You're gonna be a policeman." My father said, "I'm not being a policeman. I don't want to do that." Well, tomorrow's the civil service test down in Newark. And I want all you guys to go. And 14 of them went as a ha-ha, as a joke. And they all passed the test. I think my dad came in first. I think Dave came in first. And they pointed him right away to the police department. But my dad he went to criminology school before he got the appointment. And he wanted to go into some type of law enforcement, but just wasn't sure. There weren't many doors opening at that point in time. So my dad became a policeman. He rose to the rank, sergeant, and then captain, chief of detectives, and then retired from that.
Wow,
1975, Nutley Police Department.
very interesting.
Yes,
Not to take anything away from your mom, but the idea of the shortwave radio releasing the names, was that not a well-known fact? Or was it just something that she just happened to stumble on and it was there? And the second question I have is, how long did the German military, or government rather, release these names? For the duration of the war? Did they only do it for a few months?
they did it they started in 43, and they did it through 44, and then they ended it as the war
So it was
was,
relatively short
as the war
period.
was turning, yeah. For your first question was, no one really knew much about this. There were ham operators in the United States. And they would listen to the shortwave radio, and that crew was really amazing. We've met so many, and we've spoken to so many groups on Zoom all around the country. They're really quite a unique fraternity. They have such passion for what they do. And they were passing word around. So one would hear, hey, the German government wants to appease the American families. The German government had one thing in their mind from all the research and history that I read. They knew that the American families would withstand just so much, and after a while, they would grow weary of the war. So they had a tremendous propaganda machine, and their propaganda machine said, let's make the American families of these POWs, let's make them feel comfortable that we're taking care of their loved ones, and they're gonna come back. We're not gonna kill them, that kind of thing. So it started to spread through the ham operators. And there were a ton of them, but there were a bunch. And the way my mother got it was from a ham operator, an older man, World War I veteran. And he said, hey, by the way, I just heard news that they're going to start announcing names every night, but you have to have a shortwave radio. And Mom said, what's a shortwave radio? I don't know shortwave. And they got one. And that's when she started listening. I think the first letter that she wrote, first letter you wrote was 1943. I think it was May 19, well, it's in the book. May,
As soon as Daddy got
yeah,
drafted.
1943.
Yeah, he was drafted.
Yes.
Yeah.
So to answer your question, was it well known?
Just luck of the draw that someone heard it.
Correct. But the good news here is that other ham operators, not so much people like my mother, they called them radio listeners back then, heard names, and they would write letters as well. So some of the letters in here, they'll say, your letter was the first one that we received of 5 other letters. Others would say, your letter was the first word that we heard that our loved one is alive. You know, showing your gratitude. Thank you.
Ron,
Yes, sir.
one guy wrote to me and he asked me, if I heard his friend's son's name,
Yes.
and please he gave me the address, or no, he didn't. He said he would call his friend and tell him that I heard about his son, but I didn't.
There was a lawyer in New York City, and by the way, we've done some research. A cousin of mine actually went to the law firm. It still exists, but the man that wrote to my mother about his son missing,
I forgot his name.
I just lost it, but it's in here.
Brady. I
I'm
forgot.
starting to lose it. No, Brady's another guy. But he wrote to my mother and said, "Thank you for letting me know that my son is alive. By the way, my friend,
Yeah,
Joe Smith, his son is missing and they don't have any word on him. Would
yeah.
you please listen every night for his name?" Which mom did, but she didn't hear the name.
Aw.
Now, that man had a law firm. His father had a law firm, Manhattan. He had the law firm. He passed away. His son took over the law firm, went to law school, took over the law firm. And when we contacted him, this was the first person we tried to contact, by the way, because I did research on the law firm and I said, wow, it still exists. And I called the office and I said, you know, I'm trying to get the lineage here of the ancestors of this law firm. Yep, yeah, that's right, Mr. Negra, that's right, that's right, that's right. The son had just passed, this was the grandson now, had just passed away. Now that law firm still exists, but it's in the hands of non-family, but they still keep the name. So I thought I was onto something. Yes, sir.
I was going to say, it seems to me, coming out of the Depression, that not that many people had shortwave radios so that they would be able to avail themselves of that information. And consequently, it was much more restricted to a smaller number of people.
That's correct. It's those ham operators that really,
Yeah.
we owe a lot of gratitude to those folks.
My grandmother was notified by the Red Cross that he was alive. They thought he was dead.
Yeah.
So she said it was like he came back from the dead.
Yeah.
My mother said, one of the stories she told me, she said that Wells Fargo had a man on a bicycle, dressed in black.
Huh.
And when they saw him coming down the street, they knew that it was not good news, that it was bad news. That's how people were notified that their loved one had perished, was dead. And she said when she was standing outside with the neighbors, it was a neighborhood type street, Harrison Street, Nutley, they would see this man coming and everyone would freeze. And they would follow with their eyes where he was going. And if he stopped at a home down the street, they would all wait and then rush to that family to offer their comfort. But when he was seen, it was not good news. He wasn't delivering good news. He was delivering bad news. That's how families found out. I mean, it's remarkable that, you know, these things we watch on TV where the Army sends 2 uniformed officers and they ring the doorbell and they say, "Mrs. Jones, I'm sorry that to notify you." It didn't exist a lot. It existed by this man on a bicycle, at least in their town. Sorry. Oh, good. Thank you very much. It's really good to be late. Thank you to everyone at home.